Puzzle boxes have always been a fascination of mine. I absolutely love the idea of a complex box and holding it in my hands and trying to solve it. I actually own one myself in real life, and I love messing about with it, and at one point in time I managed to actually open it, but I've forgotten how I did it now, so it's just an ornament on my shelf that I mess about with every now and again, but they're such a cool idea. And The Room is a game that caught my eye back in the day by using this concept as the basis for an entire video game. The success of this title, I would say, ended up popularizing the escape room genre of video games, where you're trapped in a room and need to solve several puzzles to manage to escape, even though in this specific first title itself, you aren't actually stuck in a room. Of course, this idea was used in games prior to The Room, but in the title's sequels, it's definitely more of a factor. This game was massively praised when it released for a variety of reasons, but today I want to go back and have a look at it 13 years later and see if the praise that it received really is warranted. So let's go and have a look at The Room. Puzzle games are quite interesting to discuss because the genre of a puzzle video game is incredibly broad, and the market, as well as the demographic that games aim for, has not only fluctuated over the years but also fluctuates depending on the type of puzzle game in question. The roots of these games go right back to the 80s with games like Space Panic and even a computerized version of the Rubik's Cube. However, the first popular puzzle game that everyone still knows is Tetris, a title which revolutionized the entire genre and is still incredibly popular to this day. Over the years, the puzzle games like Minesweeper and Lemmings were created, which are good examples of how broad the puzzle game genre can really be. Games like these are quite strategic, and I myself still quite enjoy playing Minesweeper to this day. In 2000, the game Bejeweled was released, which of course is an incredibly important milestone in this market, as the Match 3 mechanic ended up being used in the infamous Candy Crush Saga title, which is still massively popular to this day. But Bejeweled itself was simply a clone of the 1994 game Shariki, just with slightly improved visuals, which then Candy Crush Saga ended up massively being influenced by as well. This Match 3 mechanic ended up finding resounding success primarily due to mobile devices and how you can quickly grab your phone, have a game, and then get back to whatever it was you were doing. Or you could even play one of these games whilst watching something else at the same time. Whilst Match 3 games were taking off in the mobile scene, logic puzzle games like Cut the Rope and Angry Birds were also being introduced to further add variety to the pick-up and play style games that people were loving about mobile titles. Puzzle games, as you can see, thrived on mobile devices. However, there's one big issue here with all the games that I've mentioned that have been on mobile devices, and that's that all of them have very simple gameplay and primitive graphics. Adventure games had never really been able to translate to mobile devices, and they were always one of, in my opinion, the best style of puzzle games. I absolutely love the game Myst, as well as its sequels Riven, Exile, and the rest. However, those style of games definitely could not have been played on mobile devices back in the late 90s and early 2010s. But Fireproof Games ended up revolutionizing mobile games and introduced a version of adventure games to these devices. So the aforementioned Fireproof Games is a British development company, and the 6 developers that formed the team used to work, surprisingly, on the Burnout Racing series, working for Criterion Games. They formed Fireproof with the intention of providing artwork to other developers, and their work was used in Little Big Planet, Blur, DJ Hero, and Split Second. However, they ended up deciding to create their own title, but they didn't really have the money to create a full console game. And so they decided to look at the mobile gaming market, and they wanted to create a title that was entirely designed for mobile phones, but could show just how good a mobile game really could be. They felt that other titles developed for these devices were created by console developers, and they were usually just ports or clones, and they didn't really feel like a good mobile game because the team that was creating them were inexperienced with that hardware. So when creating The Room, the entire game was devised for mobile hardware. Only 2 members of Fireproof's team were at work on the room at any given time, and it was developed in the Unity engine due to the low costs of working with that. They still had to worry about money a lot, and so the team continued to outsource and try to create the game with as little money as possible. It's estimated that in the end, the total budget of the game was only £160,000, which is not much money at all for a game nowadays. This game was initially released for Apple's iPad for 99 pence in September of 2012. However, there was also a free-to-play version that was released in December of the same year, which included the first puzzle and was titled The Room Pocket. Eventually, an Android version of the game was released in early 2013, and then later on in 2014, a Windows version with improved graphics, mouse support, and an additional level at the end of the game to tie it into the sequel, which had also been added to the original mobile versions a few months prior. Most recently, a Nintendo Switch version of the game was released in 2018, which was published by Team 17, which is the first time any title in the Room series was released on a console. This title was critically acclaimed upon its release and received loads of awards like iPad Game of the Year, a BAFTA for the Best British Game, and a Developer's Choice Award, and the success of this title ended up spawning several sequels, The Room 2, 3, Old Sins, and even a VR title as well. So now, I think it's time to have a look at this title in closer detail. So let's discuss the gameplay fundamentals of The Room. So The Room is a 3D puzzle game with a very minimalist narrative. Players are guided by strange, elusive letters from an author who left notes within a box in the titular room. As players solve puzzles around the exterior of the box, more letters are uncovered, which further reveal the author's experiences with a strange material called null, and the author's gradual descent into madness after unraveling the box's mystery. When you first start playing the game, you'll be introduced to the first of 4 puzzle boxes, and this first one is essentially your tutorial, as it explains the game's controls and it teaches you how to interact with the box and its features. You have a limited inventory, and you'll use this to hold certain items like keys, which you may find within the compartments of the box. In this tutorial, you also receive a special lens, which allows you to see things made from the null material hidden within the box. The lens can be equipped at any time to reveal these secrets, often requiring you to move around to be able to align certain symbols. The goal is to unlock each puzzle box, and upon opening each one, you will discover another one inside that's even smaller and more complex than the one prior. Now, one of the things that you'll notice when you first assume control of your character is this title has excellent atmosphere. It's really good at building tension, even though you know that nothing is ever really going to happen or jump out at you or anything. But this game overall has such an excellent, unsettling atmosphere. As you're deciphering the box, you'll hear distant sounds like creaks, thuds, and whispers, and they really add to that unnerving feeling of being in a confined space, isolated from the world, and even though the overall sound design of the game you describe as minimalist, it's still incredibly effective at what it does. This opening section of the game is very simple. You're simply navigating around the exterior of a large safe. Now, there's not really many puzzles here, and the ones that are here are incredibly easy. For example, there's a riddle, which is feed me and I shall survive, give me drink and I shall die. This is very simple. Anyone could figure this out. It's fire. You feed the fire and it stays alive. You give it water and it dies. Very easy, and especially because there's 4 symbols which are given to you which you can select from, which is making it even easier. Obviously, you're going to press the fire symbol. There is additionally a very simple rotating puzzle where you rotate several rings and try and get them into the order to form a pattern. This is something that's been seen in Resident Evil games for years now, and it's a very easy kind of puzzle. There's not much to discuss. This is very much, of course, a tutorial area. Everything here is very easy, and generally, you're going to be able to get through it in just a couple of minutes. So let's move on to the next box. The first puzzle box is very much an extension of the tutorial, really. One of my main issues with this first box is there's a lot of clicking around. you're very much just clicking around certain parts of the box, grabbing an item, moving it and putting it in another part of the box, then taking another item and putting it somewhere else, and getting another item and putting it somewhere else. It's very, very, very basic gameplay. And when I'm playing a puzzle game, I want puzzles. And this is something that does end up happening more as we progress throughout the game. But this first introductory section, I don't like it at all. And in my personal opinion, it runs into a problem that a lot of video games have. Now, I'd like to refer you all, if any of you are interested, to a podcast that I really like. It's called The Useless Podcast, and it's by the developers of the Ratchet & Clank games. Now, you might be thinking, what on earth does Ratchet & Clank have to do with this game? Now, in this podcast, it's made by two of the developers of the Ratchet & Clank series, the early Ratchet & Clank games. And in an episode specifically, they talk about, it's in Ratchet & Clank 2, and I think it's on the second level. They talk about how game developers typically like to make puzzles that make you feel clever. However, really, in actual fact, the puzzle itself is not complicated at all, and there's only a limited number of combinations that anyone would be able to find the solution to the puzzle eventually, because there's only so many combinations, there's only so many things you can actually press. So eventually, no matter what, you'll always be able to find the solution to the puzzle. And in my personal opinion, the first box specifically of the room is very much that. And I would say even the later ones to a degree are very similar, because this game overall is quite easy, to be honest, by puzzle game standards. And I would say this whole game sometimes runs into that problem in every single one of the puzzle boxes, where the puzzles are not that hard, because even if you don't actually know the answers to the puzzle and don't know how to do the puzzle, eventually by pressing things, at some point you're going to get the answer and you're going to feel good. And this is something they specifically talk about in that developer commentary that I was talking about. And that is that there's a specific puzzle on that level of Ratchet & Clank where they do that. They create a puzzle because they want you to feel good, essentially. They want you to be able to complete the puzzle. They don't want you to get stuck, because then you won't be playing the game, you won't be carrying on playing the game, you won't be engaging with it. So they don't ever want you to actually get stuck for a long period of time. So therefore, they create puzzles that are not that hard, but are just hard enough so that you can find the answer and feel good about yourself. And I feel like that's very much what the room does. And this opening box is a lot of that. It's a lot of moving around the box, grabbing an item, putting it somewhere else. And the puzzles that are there are so simple that literally you're just rotating a few discs and clicking them into place. You're moving the screen around until certain objects line up. And these things are just so simple that anybody with half a brain can figure them out. And that's an issue that I do have with the game as a whole. However, the later entries in the series are much more complex and don't necessarily do these things, but it does kind of run into a bit of a problem. Now, the first problem, which is kind of going against exactly what I just said, is there is a problem, there is a puzzle that absolutely stumped me for ages. And that is when you open a specific safe, a smaller safe, and you slide a button, and you reveal there's 4 different coloured light bulbs that are not aligned. And the solution to this problem is you need to tilt the screen, the actual phone itself, to be able to align these colours. So you get these little circular balls that are rotating and they click into place. At no point in the game at all does it ever say that you need to tilt the actual phone itself. I did not realise this was a thing the game was even going to do. I don't play mobile games much at all. So therefore, when I reached this point, I was stumped for absolutely ages. I had no idea what I was doing. I never had to look up anything. I actually had to press the hint button because I thought, am I just missing something here? Is the game broken? Has the game glitched? But no, you have to actually tilt the screen to do this. Now, this is something that should be seeded in the tutorial. If you're going to ever need to actually tilt the device itself, this should be seeded in the tutorial. You should not be expecting people to just assume this. At no point in the game had this ever been a feature at all before this. But here, you need to do that. But what also gets me is that this is completely opposite to something else that the first chapter does. And that is that at certain points, you'll be given a key. You'll open a drawer or a box or something, and there'll be a key inside. And you need to fold this key into a certain way to make it fit into keyholes. But if you just get the pieces in the wrong order and try and put it in the keyhole, You don't get it right, obviously. You don't get access to the lock. But then it gives you the solution. It shows you the solution. It highlights the solution that you need to do. It highlights the way you need the key to be built to be able to get it into that lock. So at this point, the game has no problem with telling you the solution. But for that aforementioned puzzle with the rotating light bulbs, it never tells you what to do. I do not understand the design philosophy there at all. It completely makes no sense. And it's just frustrating because a simple puzzle is telling you the solution to, which makes me cross, makes me annoyed. A more difficult one, which it's not really difficult, but the solution is never at all relayed to you in any way, and it goes against the game's philosophies that's been going up to this point. And then it doesn't tell you, it doesn't give you any hints at all. The hints don't even tell you need to tilt the screen. So that's strange. It makes me feel like maybe tilting the screen was a last-minute change because the hints themselves never once relay anything about that. So maybe it was a last-minute change or something. It's very strange to me. Anyway, this box overall, the main thing you need to do is try and unlock 3 seals which are blocking the first section of the box and not allowing you to get access to the second puzzle box. So we're completing a variety of puzzles. Mostly, though, you're just moving around the box and trying to find items that allow you access to other parts of the box. It's very, very simple, primitive stuff. At one point, you need to try and build a telescope. Get a lens and pull it, and then you'll be able to have access to the telescope. And another issue that I personally had, and this could just be to do with the game itself being dated, is I felt like moving around the box just didn't feel right. So when I was just moving and swiping to be able to grab things, or touching the screen to go and grab and pull out the lens of the telescope, it just didn't feel right to me. It felt really slow and sluggish and like it wasn't really being very responsive. Now, this might have been a specific issue to do with the device that I was playing on. I was playing on an Android as opposed to playing it on the PC version of the game. And I just didn't feel like it was. This could just be to do with dated mechanics. This was quite an early game for mobiles, and it could just be to do with that. So later entries in the series might fix this, but I did feel that's a bit of an issue. I do also know, I haven't played the PC version of the game, but from what I've seen, I think your cursor changes shape depending on whether you're hovering over something that you can actually interact with. That would be something that would be very helpful on mobile devices. I don't know how they could actually do that because obviously you're touching your screen. Your finger is essentially the cursor, but it makes the PC version a lot easier from what I've seen. This first initial box, though, overall is very, very easy, to be honest, for the most part, and you're just moving around, grabbing items from one part of the box and putting them somewhere else. There are no puzzles here in this section of the game that I found to actually be engaging in any way. An actual puzzle where you need to try and think about what the solution could be, and it takes you a while to try and think about how the mechanics of this are working, and how you can get from point A to point B to point C or whatever to be able to solve the problem. There was no actual problem-solving skills at play at all in this initial box. And if anything, I found it to just be frustrating more than anything, because all you're doing is moving around, taking off the top of a pillar or something, and there's a little item in there. You pull it open, and it allows you to open another box, which gives you another item, which takes you to another part of the box. And it all felt so simple and boring and mind-numbingly dull that I found it frustrating, to be honest. It was frustratingly simple and tedious. There was no real problem-solving skills that I needed at all, and I think that was because of the design principle that I mentioned earlier, where they don't ever want it to be too hard for certain other players, and they want you to feel like you're actually accomplishing something, as opposed to actually using your brain and accomplishing something. Chapter 3, or the third box, second box if you don't include the safe, is definitely a marked improvement from the first one or the first two. And we do get some more actual puzzles here, and the problem-solving skills that you still start to need to use are a bit more intricate, I suppose, and you need to start using a bit more outside-the-box thinking. One thing that is used in this game that I haven't actually mentioned up to this point is inspecting items. Similarly to in Resident Evil, you can look at items and move them around and try and see if there's any parts of the item that you can interact with. And I've always liked that in the Resident Evil games, and it's good here. There's one specific instance where you need to get a wooden box in this chapter, and you need to turn it around and move a part at the bottom to be able to make it to form a key, which you can then put into something else. I like that, and that's something this game does very, very well. Like I said, this specific chapter of the game does start to improve a little bit. However, there is still a little bit of some of those things that I mentioned before where you're just sort of, things are trying to make you feel good or make you feel clever by solving them, but they're actually quite easy. An example of this is the ball puzzle. However, I like this ball puzzle, to be honest. There's just enough strategy here that I feel like it is entertaining, and there is some good degree of problem solving. You need to move a ball along and rotate a little platform in the middle and get it to your destination by navigating it along certain lines and having it to go across certain patterns in a certain way that you can move it. And I like this puzzle. It's good, it's enjoyable. Then it's followed by a puzzle that is returning from the first chapter, which I really don't like, and that's just when you have to turn a dial. You turn a dial to the right until it clicks once, clicks again, and then, oh, no, you got to go back to the start. Okay, so you need to turn it to the right twice, and then turn it to the left once, twice, three, oh, no, we fucked it up again. So you got to turn it to the right twice, turn it to the left twice, then turn it back to the right. This is just stupid. I mean, what's the point of this even existing? It is just a frustrating puzzle. Like, you're going to do it. It's really easy. There's no, what is the point of this existing? It's not hard. You're going to do it. You're just going to fail it probably 2 or 3 times, then you're going to get the solution every single time. It's easy. I don't understand why this is a thing. Now, we do also have some aligning the shape puzzles in this, where you have to basically move certain parts in a certain way to form an insignia, which is kind of like this game's trademark insignia. And you need to try and move parts in a certain way to form this shape. Now, this is a relatively simple puzzle, and it's something, again, that we do see in like Resident Evil 4, for example. However, I'm okay with this. It's a decent puzzle. There is some kind of clever thinking. You need to actually use some problem solver skills, try and get this into the right place. Okay, where would this be in relation to this specific shape you're trying to create? You move them in a certain way, and then you get the solution. There's another puzzle as well where you have to try and adjust certain light to be able to resemble a shape. The certain light, there's a pattern, a specific shape that you need to form, and you need to rotate certain lights in a certain way that it creates the pattern of the shape. Again, it's something that we've seen before. These kind of puzzles are, as I said, something that we see in Resident Evil games, but I like it. Again, this is a definitely marked improvement over things that we've seen in the previous chapter. The problem-solving elements are still simple here, but they're definitely much more of an improvement on the chapters that we've seen previously. For example, there's one where you have to view a star pattern, then you have to try and get that pattern and put it into another part of the box. You need to remember it and then think to yourself, okay, where could I put that pattern into that's somewhere else on the box? I think one of the problems, though, that I would say this game runs into is that certain parts of the box only reveal themselves to you when you need them. And I think that's one of the main issues that I have here, to be honest. It goes back to what I was saying before about the game design principle, where they want to try and make you feel clever. You're always going to know, for example, with the star pattern, you know where you need to put it because where you need to put it and where you need to input it revealed itself to you when you needed it. If certain aspects of the box, if all the aspects of the box were visible right from the beginning, right from when you took that box out of the bigger box, if all the parts that you needed were there, it would make it a bit more complicated. One of the issues is that when you need to put something, when you need to put in a code, the device to input the code appears when you need to input the code. So therefore, it makes it obvious what you need to do. If it was all on display right from the beginning, it wouldn't be as obvious what to do, and you'd need to try and use a bit more strategy and thinking, okay, I remember, yeah, I saw this code here, maybe that goes over there. For example, you view a video, which is where, or you view a video which contains the word sigil, and you put that into the input device, but you know, obviously, okay, this is the word where I put it in. What if instead maybe you didn't see that word when you needed it, but you saw it earlier or something, or on a piece of paper that was right at the beginning of the level that you read, and then much later on you need to try and find the word to input into that device. So it wasn't as obvious. A lot of things in this game, it's like, okay, you see this word, and now here's the device that you put it into. You see this pattern, oh, and now here's where you need to put it into. And it makes everything so much easier than it could be. But anyway, that's this chapter of the game. It's definitely a much better chapter than the previous one. It's definitely a marked improvement. However, we're going to see in some of the later games in the next chapter that it can definitely get better. So then the final chapter of the main game is very, very visually impressive, especially for the time on mobile devices. We're looking at visuals here that look absolutely fantastic. They look like they definitely could be, at the time, I'd say Xbox 360 level graphics. Obviously, they're doing it because there's barely anything shown on the screen at the time, so therefore they can have quite a lot of visual fidelity. It's very, very impressive. And what they managed to technologically achieve here is outstanding. And despite my few criticisms with this game, there is nothing that I can take away from that. The visuals here are gorgeous. The blue lights shining around, absolutely excellent. Now, this chapter, in my opinion, is, well, it's not in my opinion, it is definitely the most linear chapter, really. The step-by-steps to get to the end goal is very, very quick and easy, and you can complete this chapter really quickly when you know what you're doing. However, it's deceptive because there's lots of visual things happening on screen. There's lots of things that take your attention away from what you actually need to do, and lots of things that are distractions, essentially. Very much the steps to get to the end are so easy. You usually just need to rotate something, rotate a dial, then complete a little insignia puzzle, put in a code, and there you go. Very easy. And then, oh, the constellations change. You need to go and look through this panel, get another code, put it in. And the constellation changes. Oh, and now we've got another insignia puzzle. And now go and get another code. It's very, very easy when you know what to do. However, getting there is the challenging part. I like this chapter a lot. Not only is it gorgeous visually, but the gameplay here is really entertaining. And even though the puzzles are very, very simple and very easy, really, it's finding them that I think on a first playthrough is really entertaining. Repeat playthroughs, no, because you know what to do. It's really easy, step by step, just get to the end really quickly. However, this game was not made for repeat playthroughs, really. If we're being honest here, it's not made to be played again and again and again. It's made to, let's say you've got, I don't know, 45 minutes before bed or whatever, or you're just trying to, try and get a bit sleepy. You complete one of these boxes, and then there you go. You fall asleep. It's a nice sort of, even though it's a bit creepy, I suppose, in a way, so maybe you don't want to. But, that's what I feel like the game was made for, really. That kind of gameplay. But visually, this chapter's amazing. Gameplay-wise, I'd say this is definitely my favourite chapter of the game. And I think it's just really good. I can't really say too much about it because the puzzles are not really that in-depth, really. We've got quite a few of the insignia puzzles. As I mentioned, we just need to go and line things up to form the specific insignia of the game. There's lots where you just need to sort of rotate and select a constellation, and then you need to look through a wooden panel to get a code, and that's a solution to the game tells you the solution that you need to input into a pad. It does that, I think, 3 or 4 times in this chapter. And the only other part is there's a section where you need to rotate a hexagonal dial to try and get it to be in a certain position. But this chapter is really, really simple, and I wouldn't say that puzzle game-wise, there isn't any elaborate puzzles here. However, the problem-solving ish, I don't know, to be honest. Like, gameplay-wise, this isn't really... This is very much more point-and-click adventure. There isn't really any puzzles that you actually need to solve here because every single solution the game tells you. But I still kind of somehow like this chapter, and I don't think it's that bad, really, at all. The ending of the game is, elusive, and you get sucked into a doorway in some kind of stone environment. It looks pretty cool. The story to this game is something I'm going to get to in a moment after we get through the epilogue section, but the epilogue is essentially what was added on as a DLC a couple of years after the main game release, but we're going to get to that now. So now we're on to the final chapter, or the epilogue, even though really it is basically the length of 2 chapters from the game up to this point. This final chapter is, in my personal opinion, what makes the game. I absolutely love this chapter. This is what I wanted more of in the actual game itself. And that is what leads me to believe that the sequels are going to be so much better than this first initial game. And definitely make me want to play them again. I did play them many years ago, but I definitely want to go and play them again to try and truly experience what the series is known for. So this epilogue begins when you have to rotate a handprint to get a gear. It's definitely strange and makes you wonder what's going on in this new environment that we've been sucked into. There's lots of things to do in this chapter. When it begins, there's quite a few different things that you can do in different orders, and it's very good. Lots of different puzzles that can be completed in different orders. This is definitely what I wanted because it's confusing as well. You're not sure what parts are for what bits are for what, and what go where, and what parts of the puzzle are needed, what parts of each puzzle are to do with different sections. One thing that I like is that there's an actual puzzle here where you have to move certain clips. So as you move one clip along, it highlights different clips in, highlights, they light up. And you need to go through a pattern and highlight every single clip once so it lights up once without ever going back on yourself. This is an actual puzzle. What I actually wanted more of in this game. Actual puzzles in a puzzle game as opposed to just moving things around and taking a bit from one place to another. Actual puzzles. This is excellent. Then there's a section that you need to input a code that's told to you somewhere else in the box. I don't like that. This is something that the game did more of in the main game, and I never liked that. It's a completely immersion breaking, really, when you think about it. Like, it's like me having a coded lock on a safe with like £10,000 in it, right? And then I write the code. It's hidden on several shelves in the room. You need to look at the side of the shelf, and then you can see one number and then another number. Why would I do that? Why would anybody do that? It's so stupid. It doesn't make any logical sense. And it reminds you that you're in a video game. And I don't like that. Now, we also have to rotate a ball to align it to a circle to get another gear. We need to use several gears in this epilogue of the game. There's a good piano playing puzzle here as well. We need to play the notes that the game plays you. Now, it's very simple, but I appreciate that the game is trying to do something different here. It's an actual puzzle. Well, it's more just copying certain things that the game does, like Simon Says, but with musical notes. It's not exactly very hard. If you mess up, you have to go back and do it again from the beginning, which is good. And I like it. It's very, very easy, but, it's good that it's doing something different. There's also some other there's another excellent puzzle where you have to put 2 keys in a box and you need to move certain squares onto a board in a certain order. So you turn these keys to try and get the box on one side into a certain way to see what pattern. Then on the other side, you have to put blocks along in a certain order. It's a very good different puzzle idea. The next one, however, is not really an original puzzle idea. That's you need to clear a path to get certain different coloured gems out of the box. You just have to sort of, move them in a certain way to get this one out. It's not an original puzzle idea at all, but the other one was a bit more original. But it's good having to do actual puzzles. After this, the epilogue finishes the game off with some mazes, but not just mazes. You have to press a button in the center to change the position of the maze, so you have to try and get things from the outer layer into the center by moving the positions so that it can actually do it and not get trapped. We get a couple of them. Excellent. Brilliant. This final section of the game is what I wanted the whole game to be. It really is. And at the end, we get some really interesting, brief, interesting, eerie cutscene that obviously leads into the room too. This is brilliant. I really wish we'd had more actual puzzles in the game. It shocks me that a game like Mystery Case Files Ravenhurst, which is definitely a casual game, it's a hidden object game, has got more complex puzzles in it than The Room, for the most part, except for this final chapter, which is a game that is supposed to be a puzzle game. Mystery Case Files Ravenhurst is not supposed to be a puzzle game. It's a hidden object game where every now and again a door has a puzzle that you have to complete to get into the room. It's baffling to me, But anyway, that concludes the epilogue and this section of the game. Now I'm going to briefly touch on the story of this game, which is quite interesting, and it's something that, it's not obvious, and it's sort of pieced together a little bit as you progress through the game. So we're going to touch on that before we get to my final review of the game as a whole. So, the story of the room is very interesting. It's set in an abandoned old manor, and you've received an invitation to go to this place from an old friend who's known as AS, and they want your help because they've been working on something. But when you get there, you don't know where they are. Except there's a mysterious safe that's been left in this person's study. On the safe is a letter that's been left by them, and they want you to help them solve the mystery of a new element that he's been studying known as null. He says that it's the key to incomprehensible power, and obviously it's left you an eyepiece which allows you to see things on other layers of reality, or as we now know, things that have been tainted by null. The game progresses from box to box, and you unlock mysteries that have been held within this safe. You need to solve the puzzles that are posed to you to be able to access more and more and find more journal entries that have been written by this elusive AS character. And they tell you, when you read them, about his discovery of the null element and how he slowly lost his mind as he learned more and more about it. When you manage to solve the final puzzle of the game, you reveal the null sample, which is an actual sample of this element that AS was experimenting on. And this is obviously what drove him to be completely insane. When you try to interact with it, however, a portal opens in the room. It takes you to a strange place surrounded by cogs and gears. Here, obviously, this is when the epilogue takes place. You need to solve even more puzzles, which open yet another portal. You're drawn towards it. The force beyond shatters this eyepiece, and you're taken to a new destination. So, obviously, the story is very... Nothing's obvious, let's say. It's not confusing, but nothing's really obvious. And we know that there is a new element called null. There's this character called AS who is studying it, has been driven to madness. Portals are a thing, take you to different dimensions or something potentially. It's a really cool basis for a story. I'm not necessarily sure whether I'm going to do analysis videos of the other games in the series, but if I do, I'll be really interested in learning more about this story, because if they do tap into the story, there's something cool that could be told here. So I like the potential of the story, and it links quite nicely into the atmosphere of the game as a whole, and it manages to link the puzzles in a way that doesn't really seem completely strange. And obviously, you're assuming that this person called AS actually wanted you to solve the box, which I think therefore lends credence to the idea that that's why there were the solutions to the codes were actually on the box itself. It's because he did want you to solve it, potentially. So it's interesting. I'd like to know why they actually decided to build an elaborate box about it, but hopefully that is something that'll be told as we delve into the story of the other games. Okay then, so the room as a whole. Now, this game, I think, to be honest, upon revisiting it, I can definitely understand why it was so successful, because it catered to a more casual crowd. And this game, I think, definitely is going to be somewhat satisfying if you're more of a casual gamer and enjoy light puzzles. I say light because there's not really that many puzzles in the main game itself, and the puzzles that are there are really simple and can be solved just by clicking around, like the ball puzzle, for example. I enjoyed that ball puzzle in Chapter 3, but you could just move the ball and rotate each little circle, and eventually you're going to find the solution. And that's the case for all the puzzles in this game. Even someone, if you never look up a walkthrough for this game, just by messing around with the environment, you will end up beating the game. And I think that's something that, for me personally, takes something away from it. If you play Myst, for example, you cannot beat that game at all unless you have a notepad next to you and write down things that you see in the environment. You got to read the books there and pick up on things that are mentioned in the books, because they're going to be relevant to things in the actual game world. Nothing is as obvious as what we see in the room, where the solutions to all the puzzles are pretty much laid out before you. You just need to be somewhat observational. You need to just look at things that are in front of you, and you'll be able to find the solution. This game, though, technologically at the time is fantastic. It really showed the power of the iPads and what could be done with mobile games at the time, really. And I think technologically, you can't take anything away from this game. It's excellent. And the developers did an excellent job at managing to create something that is still fun to play. And I think, for me personally, I can see that based on the epilogue, Fireproof Games wanted to make something that's a bit more challenging, but they also wanted it to be accessible because they understand that mobile gamers are much more casual. And if you want to get the interest of them, you need to make something a bit easier and a bit more simple. And I think that's also partly what the epilogue is doing. The epilogue is heightening the difficulty a little bit and is teasing you with a bit more of a story in the hope that you will play The Room 2 when hopefully they will make things a bit more challenging. Because The Room really, in my personal opinion, is more of a proof of concept for something that could be excellent. Of course, the first game is technologically brilliant, but the other games, I really hope, do something much more with the concept that we have here, because in my personal opinion, this is just a demo, really. And I would love to see something much more fleshed out with a lot more on offer. The games don't need to be that long as the puzzles themselves are actually challenging. Because really here, we just have more of a point-and-click adventure game than an actual puzzle game. And I would like a lot more puzzles, because what the epilogue did was fantastic. I really enjoyed everything I got there. The puzzles are excellent, even though there are a few moments where I'm thinking, okay, it's made this bit a little bit too easy. I still think it's good. Across the board, it's good. The earlier chapters, I'd say more are leaning on the average to poor side of things, in my personal opinion. But I managed to get pulled through by the game's excellent visuals and good sound design. And even though not much was done with the story here, there's just enough that I think it can be interesting. It definitely could be telling an interesting story. So overall, The Room is an enjoyable game. And I think it's still worth your time to a degree. You know, go into it knowing that this game, it's not going to be that challenging. It's not really much of a puzzle game, really. And I think you'll get a lot more out of it. It's more of a point-and-click adventure game and a better proof of concept. I would like to see The Room 1, 2, 3, and 4 all put on the Xbox One or the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 nowadays. Put them all together in one collection and then give that to gamers. Because I think that is more what Fireproof Games wanted. Based on what I've seen in this game, when they do try and ramp up the difficulty, and there is something good at the end of the game. They've done something good there. They've heightened the difficulty to the point where that last chapter is good and enjoyable. And I think if you put them all together as one package, we might have something here that's an excellent piece of entertainment. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. My next analysis video is going to be covering Dark Souls 3, which will be coming out in a couple of weeks' time. I hope you enjoyed this. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Maybe become a channel member. If you want to help support me, make sure that this can become something more than just a hobby for me personally. Thank you for watching. Have a good one.